because I want to tell you a little story. I don't know that I've ever done this before, but if I have, it's very, very rare. I want to read from a New York Times article. It's a stunning article. And on so many levels, it's a crucial article. It's about the Pigford scandal at the Department of Agriculture. And not just the vindication of Andrew Breitbart, and it certainly is that, but how your government functions and how you're being ripped off all the time. And it's by Sharon Lafreniere. I can't read it all, but I'm going to read a part of it. This affects you. This is the tip of the iceberg. In the winter of 2010, after a decade of defending the government against bias claims by Hispanic and female farmers, Justice Department lawyers seem to have victory within their grasp. Ever since the Clinton administration agreed in 1999 to make $50,000 payments to thousands of black farmers, the Hispanics and women had been clamoring in courtrooms and in Congress for the same deal. This is the New York Times. They argued, as the African Americans had, that biased federal loan officers had systematically thwarted their attempts to borrow money to farm. But a succession of courts, and finally the Supreme Court, rebuffed their pleas. Instead of an army of potential claimants, the government faced just 91 plaintiffs. Those cases, the government lawyers figured, could be dispatched at limited cost. So in other words, the claims from the Hispanic community and the women and so forth, they were bogus. One court after another, regardless of the judge or judges or justices involved, said no. And the career lawyers at the Justice Department said no. So they thought they dispatched all of this, but they were wrong. On the heels of the Supreme Court's ruling, interviews and records show the Obama administration's political appointees at the Justice and Agriculture Departments engineered a stunning turnaround. They committed $1.33 billion to compensate not just those 91 plaintiffs, but thousands of Hispanic and female farmers who had never claimed bias in court. The deal, several current and former government officials said, was fashioned in White House meetings despite the vehement objections, until now undisclosed, of career lawyers and agency officials who'd argue there was no credible evidence of widespread discrimination. This is Obama. What's more, some protested, the template for the deal, the $50,000 payouts to black farmers, had proved a magnet for fraud. I think a lot of people were disappointed, said Michael Kelly, who retired last year as the Agriculture Department's Associate General Counsel. You can't spend a lot of years trying to defend those cases honestly, then have the tables turned on you and not question the wisdom of settling them in a broad sweep. They settled cases that weren't even brought. The compensation effort sprang from a desire to redress what the government and a federal judge agreed was a painful legacy of bias against African Americans by the Agriculture Department. But an examination by the New York Times shows that it became a runaway train driven by racial politics, pressure from influential members of Congress and law firms that stand to gain more than $130 million in legal fees. In the past 5 years, it's grown to encompass a second group of African Americans, as well as Hispanic, female, and Native American farmers. In all, more than 90,000 people have filed claims. The total cost could top $4.4 billion. Now remember, I just said, in the court system, the government already won. They were down to 91 claimants, 91 plaintiffs. Obama opened it up. Back to the New York Times. From the start, the claims process prompted allegations of widespread fraud and criticism that its very design encouraged people to lie because relatively few records remained to verify accusations. Claimants were not required to present documentary evidence that they had been unfairly treated or had even tried to farm. Agriculture Department reviewers found reams of suspicious claims from nursery school-aged children and pockets of urban dwellers, sometimes in the same handwriting with nearly identical accounts of discrimination. Yet those concerns were played down as the compensation effort grew. And though the government has started requiring more evidence to support some claims, even now people who say they were unfairly denied loans can collect up to $50,000 with little documentation. Let me tell you what went on here, folks. This thing was dead. It had been litigated in federal district courts, in appellate courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. There were judges appointed by Clinton, judges appointed by Carter, Reagan, judges appointed by both Bushes. They all heard it. They all said enough. But Obama, I'm summarizing the rest of the article. Obama, the Hispanic caucus in Congress, a number of political supporters, an assistant attorney general over at the Justice Department, they all conspired to open the system back up. And that's exactly what they did. And the Secretary of Agriculture, Vilsack, was a prime mover behind this too. The groups found a champion in the new Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack. New settlements were provided a way to neutralize the argument that the government favors black farmers over Hispanic and Native American or women farmers, an Internal Department memorandum stated in March 2010. The payouts pitted Mr. Vilsack and other political appointees against career government lawyers and agency officials who argued the legal risks didn't justify this settlement in these payouts. Beyond that, they said it was legally questionable to sidestep Congress and compensate the Hispanic and female farmers out of a special Treasury Department account known as the Judgment Fund. The fund was restricted to payouts of court-approved judgments and settlements, as well as to out-of-court settlements in cases where the government faces imminent litigation and can lose. Some officials argued that tapping the fund for the farmers set a bad precedent, since most had arguably never contemplated suing and might not have won. And I might add, many were never farmers. Justice Department lawyers worried about false claims, but the lawyer familiar with the Clinton administration stance said they decided it was better to err on the side of giving money to people who might not qualify if they went through the litigation than to deny money to people who actually deserve it. So Clinton was the first one. Settled with some black lawyers, Farmers Association. That opened the floodgates. Then Obama, with the floodgates closed by the federal court system, kicked the doors back open again. Kicked it back open again because, there's other minorities and women and so forth, and they have a right to, and we can't treat them unequally, whether they have farmed or not. Justice Department lawyers worried about false claims, but the lawyer familiar with the Clinton administration stance said they decided it was better to err on the side. Randy Roth, the settlement's court-appointed monitor, said that whatever its shortcomings, the accord charted the most efficient legal remedy. John Coffey, Jr., a Columbia Law School professor and specialist in complex litigation, said that not requiring documentary evidence for settlements was, quote, quite unusual. But there were also special circumstances. But he said, I don't think they realized how much of an incentive they were creating for claims to multiply. It's a little bit like putting out milk for a kitten. The next night you get 15 kittens. And it goes on and on and on. The public trough, corruption, cronyism, politics, folks. Over $4 billion. People who never farmed in their lives. People who never had a garden. People in the inner city. People who weren't born. Could top $4.4 billion. But this was supported by the NAACP. It was supported by one ethnic group after another. And to oppose it was to be called a racist. Now, this is so unbelievable. Tens of thousands of claims pouring in. And when Obama threw the doors back open for others, where the courts had shut them, amazingly, he got the support of a 109,000-member Black Farmers Association and a number of other groups at your expense. And Congress was involved in this too, folks. Republicans and Democrats, according to this article. Republicans and Democrats appropriated money for this scam. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. Yesterday we talked about the cell phones. Now all this fraud. Settlement for discriminating against people who never farmed. Some farmed, some didn't. But there's almost no justification to demonstrate that you were discriminated against. Obama threw the doors wide open. I'm telling you something. Andrew Breitbart, this isn't about Andrew Breitbart, but it's important to mention him here because he was banging the table endlessly about this, you'll recall. And he was sued over it. And he called me at home several nights late, quite frankly, worried about those lawsuits and seeking some input. And I had him on the air, and I went on the air to talk about this. But he pointed out, Pigford, he said, the biggest scam of them all. He was attacked and he was mocked. Ladies and gentlemen, This is a massive scam. I want you to think about this. And then think about it in the context of the green energy scams like Solyndra. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. And think about the scams now going on with the food stamp program under this president. And think about the scams going on with the disability program under Social Security with this president. This president has a mentality that whatever you've earned does not belong to you. That whatever you've earned out of an unjust system. A system built from the framers of the Constitution on forward. That was unjust. That was discriminatory. And let me tell you something, folks. There's massive amount of spending and fraud and abuse, and it's going on all over the place. And they dare to talk about furloughs, and they dare to talk about you can't cut this and cut that, and they dare to talk about tax increases. This is highway robbery. This is institutionalized corruption of the highest order. In our past, scandals like this, the Teapot Dome scandal and others, would bring down presidents. It would bring down administrations. Now, nothing brings it down. Nothing. People who never farmed, people never discriminated against, people who weren't alive at the time allegations are made, no evidence required to substantiate your claims, political decisions trumping legal decisions, political appointees trumping career civil servant appointees, Congress, Republicans and Democrats voting to fund this scam, the court shut the door, Obama kicks them wide open. I don't know. I felt I had to spend some focused time on this story. Oh, I could be bouncing around all over the place, but I needed to spend the time on the Pigford scandal. And Pigford's exactly right. And this is just one program. Just one. When's the last time we had a thorough study of the food stamp program? Or the disability program? The corruption, the cronyism, the enormous sums of money. There are a number of people, folks, millions and millions of people, who are benefiting from your labor, who are benefiting from your tax dollars, who are crooks, who are corrupt, with politicians in Washington buying their votes. It's absolutely disgusting. And I am stunned that the New York Times took the time to write this, which is another reason I decided to read from it.